I wanted to like this movie so bad. I went into this with the expectations that I know what these movies are. They're dumb fun films, they don't take themselves too seriously, they're not exactly the most faithful, but as long as I was entertained, I would be happy. I went into this with an open mind. It did not have to be peak cinema, I just wanted to have a good time, and for the most part, I did. But I cannot in good faith say that this is exactly a good movie, and that really pains me to say. You see, over the years, I've had a pretty complicated relationship with these Venom movies. When the first one came out in 2018, I was strongly against it because of the fact that it didn't have Spider-Man in it, and I did not think a Venom origin story works without that character. Along with the fact that I've never really been a true Venom fan myself, I really just did not think that movie was made for me, and I was not a fan of it at all. Then come around a few years later as Venom Let There Be Carnage releases, and shockingly enough, I really enjoyed that movie. It's got a lot of flaws, don't get me wrong, but I think it was such an entertaining film that I completely could ignore that and just have a good time, turning my brain off and enjoying the movie for what it was. That movie retroactively made me enjoy that first Venom film even more because I could understand that these movies aren't what I wanted them to be, but despite that, it doesn't mean that they're bad, it just means that I need to look at them in a different way, and change my perspective on these films, going with a more open mind. So while these movies are far from perfect, they have a lot of problems, and they're not what I was hoping to see out of a Venom franchise, I'm not gonna lie to you and say that I didn't have a good time watching them. So when this movie got announced, I was genuinely looking forward to it. Despite Sony putting out some actual slop nowadays and not doing anything good with the Spider-Man IP, the Venom films have always been a gem in this pile of garbage they've been putting out. I could always rely on them to be these more lighthearted, entertaining movies that may not understand the character of Venom as I know him, but have a take that is pretty unique and actually really fun to watch. The trailers made this film look really promising as they showed fun ideas like Venom Horse, Venom Frog, these crazy things that are just so out there and only could work in a movie like this. They teased Null would be in the film. It seemed like some really interesting ideas they were doing was they adapted some really cool symbiote lore, and going into the film tonight, I was genuinely excited to watch it. And unfortunately enough, I think that this film is way too messy in its plot to the point where it is actively hurting the parts of the movie that are working. This movie is not all bad. I don't even know if I would say it's a bad movie necessarily. It's just the fact that it tries to do so much in such little time with only an hour and a half of a runtime in this movie. They really try and squeeze in a lot, and I think it suffers because of that. Whatever fun concepts are in here and interesting ideas are smothered by a narrative that is all over the place, skipping around too much, a movie that is edited in such a strange, frantic way, along with some really dull and uninspired visuals that really hold this movie down from reaching its full potential. There's absolutely an interesting emotional core in there between Venom and Eddie that I think almost works, but by the time the credits rolled, I wouldn't say I exactly had the desired reaction they wanted. I was just kind of laughing in amazement that this baffling movie came to be, rather than feeling the emotional weight of what just transpired. Venom: The Last Venom is ultimately a movie that I feel like is a massive waste of potential and a film that really disappointed me coming out of it, which sucks to see because I do think that this movie could have been something really good. Despite this franchise's flaws, the dynamic between Eddie and the symbiote has always been the strongest part of the film, and I think that if they really honed in on that like they tried to here, you could have told a really interesting story. But instead we get this movie that is just such an insane fever dream of a film that I cannot believe it exists and is out there. I'm glad that this is the last movie in the trilogy because I do not trust Sony to make more of these movies. Honestly, Sony is probably the real villains because what keeps this movie from being so interesting is the fact that it's bogged down with so much sequel bait and nonsense that isn't even affecting this movie at all. And for a film that's supposed to be this great last dance between Eddie and the Venom symbiote, is kind of steamrolled by this idea that they're setting things up for the future, and I hate that so much. If you're not gonna be able to tell a complete and satisfying narrative in your own movie, you should not be worrying about the sequel, especially when this film has such a finality to it. I don't understand the process of trying to both turn this film into a grand send-off for the character while also setting things up for the future. It feels so counterproductive and goes against the exact messaging in the movie. Sony cannot keep getting away with this. They need to be stopped. I'm so sick of them taking this Spider-Man license and doing some really uninspired things with it. Or whenever they do something correctly like this, it's just completely held back by the fact that they cannot help but meddle in these movies. They refuse to let artists and storytellers tell actual stories because they need to set up movies for the future so they can keep this license held hostage even longer. God, it upsets me to no end because I really wanted to like this, but I'm afraid that here it just does not live up to the hype. If I could just say something nice about this movie, Tom Hardy's commitment to being a silly little freak is so respectable and is what makes these movies work as well as they do. These films would not be watchable with a lesser actor in the role. Tom's commitment to doing the most insane things possible and making himself look like an actual disgusting freak at every turn for our entertainment make the movies worth the price of admission alone. He is such a talented actor, and the sheer commitment he has to walking around all disgusting and sweaty, babbling to himself, it is so commendable, and I find so much joy in this character. The amount of chemistry he's able to find with himself is incredible. I don't think you understand how hard it is for an actor to act against themselves. It's so impressive to me that he's able to deliver these lines in such a convincing way to where you really feel like these are two different characters. I really appreciate how much effort he puts into making these movies what they are. You can tell that he actually does care about this character, and while Sony may be making them to try and keep this franchise going, Tom is genuinely invested in the Venom symbiote and wants this dynamic to work, and he absolutely pulls it off. But here's the thing, while their dynamic is still the absolute strongest part of this movie and what makes it work as well as it does, in spite of all of its flaws, I feel like it takes a few steps back in this film. In the first movie, we have these two characters meet, and by the end of the film, they've kind of agreed to work as one life form. And then in the second movie, we explore what that's like, living with someone else inside your head as this alien with different wants and needs in life. And then by the end of that movie, they're finally on the same page as they try and work together as one symbiotic being, mutually benefiting from each other. And I feel like in this movie here, it kind of reverts back to the start of the second movie because they're just arguing throughout the entire film, and it feels like it goes against the direction they had previously set up for the character. I was expecting them to dive more into this relationship between the two and show them actually bond and kind of grow to like each other, but they spend the entire movie bickering and arguing, and by the end, when it gets to this big emotional climax, it doesn't work as well as it should for me because the bond just hasn't reached that point where I feel like these characters actually do truly care about each other. I wish that this movie would have focused more on that dynamic and what makes it so special rather than just kind of keep doing the same things we've seen before, because I think there could have been something really interesting to do with these characters, but instead we're just given more of the same, which is a big shame because again, it's still the strongest part of the movie, but I couldn't help but notice that it wasn't moving forward in their growth at all, which sucks because Tom Hardy is doing a fantastic job here and he does not deserve writing that isn't doing his acting justice. All the good things he does in this film are completely suffocated by the movie itself and the narrative choices because for some reason this film has some of the worst pacing I've ever seen in a movie. The plot moves along at breakneck speeds here. There is so much going on with so many different plot lines and events happening, it all gets lost and jumbled together. It's so weird how this movie refuses to just take a second and sit in the moment as you let the characters breathe before going into the next moment of chaos. But no, it's just from one moment to another, to another, to another, jumping around from different plot lines. Some that never even get resolution. There are things set up in this film that ultimately have no payoff, and I think it's such a strange move that to me screams like this film had a lot cut out in the editing room. Again, this is only like an hour and a half of actual movie before credits, and the fact that it's this short, it feels to me like there's so much missing that had to get cut out of it for the runtime, and that really hurts the film. With the actual plot of the film revolving around Eddie on the run as a fugitive now, and he's trying to go on this road trip with Venom, all while the xenophages are hunting him down, being sent in by Null. And I like the idea that Eddie is in this movie grasping with the life he left behind, and now 1 year in as being the Venom hero, he's struggling with still adapting to that lifestyle and misses what could have been. And there's so much more to this movie that you could have taken a dive into. But the issue is that this movie moves at such a fast pace that you're not actually able to take a second and digest the story of the film or really understand the arc, because honestly, Eddie doesn't have a very satisfying arc in the movie for me. And because of that, with this big emotional climax at the end of the movie, it doesn't really land for me because I don't really feel like they earned it. It doesn't help that Venom is not in this movie as much as I expected him to be, because you've got two distinct plots in here, which is the Venom Eddie road trip and then whatever's going on with Area 51, as you have Chiwetel Ejiofor's character and Juno Temple's character trying to investigate this symbiote issue, and that part just drags this film down so much, especially because there's a random family subplot they throw in this movie, and it feels so forced in there. Their inclusion to me feels like they were working backwards, and they needed Eddie to have someone to save in this movie, so they introduced them, and their only real purpose in the movie is to just drive the plot forward without actually having anything interesting to do or say. The most frustrating thing about this pacing, though, is that things just aren't explained in the movie. General Strickland's motivation is all over the place, and there's this weird masked figure he's reporting to that I don't really think we even get a payoff for, but just the fact that his motivation changes on a dime, and we never really even see or learn why, he just does things to drive the plot forward. The biggest problem in this movie for me is that things just kind of happen for the sake of the plot moving forward. It's always, and then this happens, and then this happens. It's never because of this. Events don't really affect the other events in the movie, and that's a huge problem. And having things happen just for the sake of it is so disjointed, and this movie is entirely that. They go to locations just for things to happen, just so this can happen and then this can happen. It's so all over the place, it makes it both really hard to follow and mind-boggling that they don't stop for a second to even deal with these concepts they're introducing. I've avoided spoilers for a little bit. I'm pretty sure you can tell how I feel about this movie now, but I'm going to talk about more spoilers going forward here. There are some more specifics I want to talk about, so if you're trying to avoid spoilers for the film, this is your warning to not continue with the video any further. If you like these movies, I say it's worth watching in the theater, but if not, I think you should just wait until streaming. It is equally as entertaining as it is frustrating for me. Okay, but to get to spoilers real quick. Venom gets dropped off at Vegas one point and goes gambling, and Mrs. Chen is there, who is amazing. Their chemistry is so funny. I love their dynamic. They are a joy to watch together. But the whole plot of the movie is that Eddie can't turn into Venom because the xenophages soldiers can hunt the symbiotes, but when he's not Venom, they cannot find him. And Mrs. Chen asks Venom to dance with her because they're winning big, they're living the high life in Vegas. And Eddie knows they can't do this because they will be hunted, but the Venom symbiote is mad at Eddie, and so because of that, he transforms and dances with Mrs. Chen, and then they're immediately ambushed by a xenophage. It just happens because they needed Eddie to be caught by the xenophage to move the plot forward. And I know, I'm expecting a lot out of a Sony Venom film, but when these narrative choices are actively hindering the enjoyable parts of the film, I'm gonna have an issue with it. They also kind of do some Life Foundation stuff in this movie. They don't actually do that by name. They introduce all these different symbiotes and they tease that the Area 51 people are collecting them, and the payoff is just not worth it for me. Random scientists just become Venom symbiotes out of nowhere and then are immediately killed off. They're building up this big thing throughout the movie, and then it goes nowhere. The only person who does get a symbiote is this scientist who I could not tell you for the life of me what her name was. She did a good job in the film, but they mostly refer to her as Christmas, and I cannot tell you her name, but she becomes a symbiote, and in the last half hour of the film becomes this like huge part of the movie, and that's great for her. But there was nothing ahead of time that let them develop her character at all, so I just feel like that was kind of a waste. You could have done it in a way that was a great subversion, like in how Civil War does it with the Winter Soldiers. But no, the way it's done here, they go through with it, but then immediately just kill them all off. And when the whole third act revolves around that, it does not work for me at all. But let's talk about the actual villain of this film, Null, the King in Black himself. Introducing the Null in the final movie of your Venom trilogy is a bold move already, because that is a lot of ground to cover in one film. So how does Venom the Last Dance tackle this character? They don't. What you see in the trailer is basically what's in the movie. He's in the film for 3 scenes in total, 4 if you count the post-credits. Andy Serkis does a good job as always. He has a really intimidating voice. I couldn't even tell it was him. I like the design, even if it does look a little PS3 graphics towards the end there. But the character is advertised as this huge threat who's gonna change the universe, while at the same time, you've got the director going around on a press tour, letting people know that Null's gonna be set up for another movie in the future. So I already go into this film knowing the fact that he's not gonna be in it very much, knowing that he's not going to get an unsatisfying arc, and because of that, he's just kind of there. He doesn't do anything interesting. He just moves the plot along and spouts some really generic dialogue. Andy Serkis is way too talented of an actor to make those lines deliver at all, because oh my god, they are so generic. They have him opening the movie talking about I am Null, God of the Void, just saying this exposition at the screen. I was not rocking with it at all. I'm not going to pretend I know everything about Null as a character. The most exposure I've gotten to Null is through Marvel Snap and some Daredevil tie-in comics I read. But in the context of this film, they gave me 0 reasons to care about him, which sucks. Especially with the rumors that he's gonna have a huge role in Spider-Man 4. Interestingly enough, this movie does nothing to set that up, which is great for me. I'm glad they're not committing to telling that story, because Spider-Man and Null have interacted like one time in the comics, and he is much more of a symbiote character than a Spider-Man character, and I have no interest in telling this big symbiote multiversal story immediately after No Way Home. So it is a weight off my shoulders to know that these universes are not gonna touch, because I need Sony to stay as far away from MCU Spider-Man as possible. Do not let these universes merge ever. But now knowing that Null is set up for the future, I have to wonder, what movie? Because Venom quote-unquote dies at the end of this film. Eddie survives and just goes back to getting his life again, which I guess he succeeds in his arc. But the question is, now what? Is Null gonna be the villain of a Madam Web sequel? Are we gonna have to see Madam Web, Morbius, and Kraven the Animal Lover team up to fight Null? Because I could not tell you how disinterested I am in that. That would be the first movie to sell 0 tickets. If they just decided to vaguely set him up for the future, fine, but I could not see where this character returns if it's not going to be in Venom, because they gave Eddie such a finality with the Venom symbiote in an emotional climax that is genuinely touching at times, even if it didn't work as well as it should have for me. I'm not going to deny that chemistry. Tom Hardy makes that work so well, but there's such a finality to it where I could see this being the end of the character, and you want to tease Null now? I don't see where this can go, and I hope they just drop it, because I do not have an interest in seeing this version of the character continue unless things are going to change real quick. Even if the second post-credit scene does basically confirm that Venom is going to be back out there as he sticks to a cockroach. Maybe he's going to go to Flash Thompson and we get like an Agent Venom movie. That'd be kind of cool. I'd be down for that. Sure, why not? This franchise is already in the mud. Just go crazy with it. Do something insane. Just, again, keep it away from Spider-Man 4. I don't know, man. This movie disappointed me. I genuinely wanted it to be really good. I was excited for it. I thought there was potential. I think Tom Hardy is a national treasure. But instead we got this movie that is so bizarre in the way it's edited and paced, and something that I could not unfortunately find myself getting into. It has its moments basically anytime Tom Hardy and Venom symbiote are interacting with each other, but besides that, the B-plots drag it down a lot and make this film really hard to enjoy. With the box office already not looking great for this movie, I need Sony to take a huge message away from this and just put an end to the spum. I'm not looking forward to the Kraven movie at all. Why did they make him like animals? The trailers alone already show that they've completely mischaracterized him, and after the hot streak they've been on of Morpheus, Madam Web, and now this? They expect me to go watch a Kraven movie? My second favorite Spider-Man villain after Mysterio? You're gonna massacre him like this? And I'm supposed to cheer? You have the audacity? How dare you, Sony? The Spider-Man license really needs to return back to Marvel. I don't know how many more of these movies I can put myself through. But then again, the film did have Venom Horse, so I can't stay mad at it forever. I don't like being negative as much as I hate this stupid universe, so I'm gonna go ahead and end things there. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed what I had to say, feel free to give the video a like and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. What did you think of Venom the Last Dance? I would love to hear what everyone has to say and continue the conversation down below. And if you want to see another video like this, you can click right over here. If you don't do it, the spum is gonna outlive us all. Please, subscribe and help kill the spum. I can't take any more spum.